everyone. Welcome back to The First for Us. We are a podcast dedicated to the after show of The Last of Us television program on HBO. I am John, one of your hosts, and with me again is...
I'm Justin.
And I'm Kevin.
And we thank you if this is your first time or if you've come back and you checked out our previous episode. We did a recap for episodes 1 and 2. You can find that in the link below as well, as well as on our Gray 17 podcast network YouTube feed, which is where we're coming to you from, which is where most of you probably know us from, which we will be obviously still doing. But we appreciate you coming and hanging out with us to talk about this. This episode, we're going to cover episode 3 of The Last of Us, which just aired this last Sunday. I'm going to give a brief synopsis of the episode, and then we'll dive in. So in the present, Joel and Ellie heed Tess's final instructions and hike to meet allies Bill and Frank. On their journey, Joel teaches Ellie about the government's execution of innocents during the early days of the outbreak. In a flashback to 2007, Frank stumbles onto the compound of paranoid survivalist Bill, who takes him in, and the two form a romantic relationship, sharing a love of music and food. Several years later, Frank contacts Tess over the radio, and the couples enter a tenuous friendship. In the present, Frank is crippled by a degenerative illness and asks Bill to euthanize him after they marry. But Bill, not wanting to live without Frank, kills himself as well. Joel and Ellie arrive sometime later. They discover a letter Bill left for Joel, where he tells him that protecting Frank is what gave his life meaning after the outbreak. Bill left Joel his truck and supply of weapons. Joel takes the truck and sets out with Ellie to find Tommy. So one of the things we addressed right off the top, I know last episode I was like, man, I don't know how they're going to get from Boston to Wyoming in 9 episodes. Well, they got a truck now, so that'll help speed that along. Before I turn it over to you guys, one thing I wanted to mention, because it starts the very beginning of this episode, and I meant to talk about it from the beginning of episode 2, which was food. So if you remember in episode 2, Joel and Tess are chewing on some leather that they call beef jerky and generally struggling, only to see Ellie pull out this fat ass chicken sandwich that she barely takes 2 bites of and offers none to them at all. And then this episode opens with Joel throwing Ellie some food, as I assume her selfish ass finally ate the sandwich. So I want to start there and see 2 things. 1, is Ellie selfish? 2, if it was you, would you have just snatched some of that chicken sandwich for yourself? And 3, since we're talking about food, does anyone eat mushrooms in this timeline anymore? We saw Bill, we'll get to. He prepares a meal. Is he cooking portobellos? Is he cooking any mushrooms? So I'll turn it over to you guys with that.
I think I'd steer clear of any mushrooms in this universe for sure. But
I wouldn't.
Yeah, the food
I'd still be
looked
eating
great.
mushrooms.
But yeah, I can't put her on the selfish category. I mean, living in that type of survivalist environment, it's pretty hard for me to slap that kind of label on somebody. But as to whether I'd eat any of it, I'd hope not, but it's hers. But at the same time, you never know what's going to come over you when you're in a survival situation. That's when you really figure out who everybody is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Kevin on some of those points. I wouldn't really call her selfish as much as maybe cautious. I mean, it's still a lot about a trust building issue. And really at that point, during that scene where they're all eating, they don't trust each other. They think, she's been infected, so they really don't want to go anywhere near her or touch anything that she's touched. So hence, Tess throwing her the magazine to go to the bathroom. Yeah. So I honestly, like, I would still eat mushrooms. I mean, I'm a huge mushroom fan. Of course, knowing which ones to avoid, but I would still eat a portobello if it came up, or if I found one in the wild. But that's just me. That's probably why I wouldn't survive in this universe to begin with.
I would miss my favorite mushroom Swiss burger with mustard, but I don't know what to tell you.
That.
I'm not taking chances.
Go back to the mushroom Swiss with mustard. I don't know if I've heard that. That's an interesting combo. Before we move on to what I'm sure will be the biggest part of what we're going to talk about, which is Bill and Frank and their story. I don't want to jump completely off of Ellie and Joel because they do two things, right? They book in the episode and then that they start and end it. And in that they do some interesting, I guess, actions, or we learn a little bit more about them. So I wanted to start with at the beginning when Ellie and Joel are walking, both to get the supply point at the gas station and then what happens there. I'll start with, I don't know that I needed to know how the infection started. As usual, when you build something up in your mind, when you actually get an answer, it's almost always a letdown. And I don't know that Joel's explanation that he heard, or the prevailing theory is that it got in flour and it came in the food chain. I don't know that that's really as satisfying as I would have wanted it. Again, I think I was okay just not knowing. I also probably would have been okay not knowing that the government sucks in this timeline as well, and they're just flat out murdering civilians. All over a weekend, an entire weekend, civilization crashes, and yet they were able to produce those Fedra signs, though, which I thought was time well spent as the world burns. Here you are producing signs, but let's start there. Thoughts on the beginning with Ellie and Joel?
Well,
I guess okay, go ahead, Kevin.
I was convinced that she was going to do something that she was going to need to be saved from when she goes down into the cellar or whatever and sees an infected, and it didn't turn out that way at all. But it was a startling scene, seeing her, cut into his forehead and seeing the fungus in there, and then ending whatever form of life he still has. I mean, you could easily say that was a mercy killing, except that, the look on her face was not of mercy, but of malice. And, it's just another illustration that she is much definitely hardened by the environment in which she's grown up in. And it's sad, but it's also necessary in her life, in her world, that she is more along the lines of somebody who is just going to not give a crap and keep going for what she needs.
I mean, but aren't we all just products of our environment? So really, you can't blame Ellie at all for being the way she is. But I mean, to answer your question, John, I'm not surprised by any of it. It's back in the second episode when the focus was on Indonesia, and the general or the soldier was talking to the doctor about how the person that she was examining was infected by working in a flour and grain plant. And she said, like, you could see the life drain out of her face. And she said, that is the perfect substrate. So the fact that they then continued on and saying that a lot of the cordyceps spores started passing through foodstuffs, taking out the whole airborne thing, which is like one thing that we talked about during the last episode about one of the major differences between like the game and the show is they don't even mention spores at all. It's all through ingestion and bites and bodily fluids and stuff like that. Having it transmit through foodstuffs honestly makes perfect sense to me. So it really didn't bother me at all. And then another thing about Fedra or the federal government just slaughtering people, that really doesn't surprise me at all either. Like, it was really sad to see, especially during that scene about how they were all loading them up on trucks and you're going to go to the QZ, and almost like telling somebody, we're taking Rover to the farm where he can run and jump and play with all the other dogs and stuff like that. And, to turn out that there wasn't any place to take them. And like Joel even said during that scene, dead people don't become infected. So it's, as horrible as it is, it honestly didn't surprise me that the government would take those steps. As many governments around the world, this isn't just about the US government or the remnants thereof. It's just about any government saying, we have to stop the spread. Therefore, they started bombing cities. They started slaughtering people. They started, if it's going to pass human to human, reduce the human population as much as you can to try and stop the spread. And it's sick and it's twisted and it's demented, but honestly, in that universe, that's what they thought was the only way.
Yeah, I do like the show's really good about details, right? If you pay attention, to your point about, oh, they referenced that in the second episode. I saw a video, I think, of a guy, he was pointing out all the times that Joel declined basically carbs in the first episode, right? No pancakes here, no cake here, kind of avoiding what seems like, the neighbors, I think they had biscuits or something like that. So,
right. Yeah.
Details and Easter eggs that they very much pay attention to, I think is one of the things that makes this show great. And no, I'm not surprised that I guess the government would do that. It's just, I don't know, it sucks. You know what I mean? Especially, of course, when we got the look of the baby, I thought, oh no. Because one of the other things that they did and didn't do from the previous two episodes was they did have a flashback, but it wasn't a cold open and it wasn't isolated. Mm-hmm. We just tracked, Bill and then Bill and Frank, which we can jump right into. Right after, I will mention, I am interested, Kevin, to your point about malice with Ellie. On the one hand, I want to give her a pass because, as we saw in the other parts of the episode, she was super excited to see Mortal Kombat machine. She was super excited to see the airplane. She's just super excited. She continually basically sees things for the first time and is a kid. And on the one hand,
you got to fly in the sky.
Right. So do they. And now they're on the ground. It's a little endearing. I hope we don't keep doing this for 7 more episodes where she keeps, oh, look at we get it. Okay. You grow up in a hellhole that is the QC. But so I'm willing to give her a little pass because it did kind of seem almost like a curiosity, like a little science experiment, right? Like, I don't know how many she's come across. This is a perfect opportunity. There's no danger there. So let me see what I can get away with. And then again, in the end, just, that part was the look she had on her face when she stabbed him and the joy it seemed to bring. That was the part that I thought, well, this could be an issue.
If honestly, I myself wondering how, an infected had been, under there for 20 years and had not transitioned, towards a more advanced form of the zombie, but you never know how long it had been down there either. It could have been a lot shorter than I was guessing, but
and if it ran out of things to consume.
True.
But
the other thing I was thinking of was, we're gonna have 9 episodes, and we've had 3 of them now, and the first 2, they had plenty of other people to interact with, and I'm not saying they can't interact with other people along the road here, but you're getting to a point now where it's probably just going to be Belle Ramsey and Pedro Pascal, and they've got to find a way to not have the 2 of them on screen for an hour per episode. That is a very, very daunting call sheet for an actor. Something that it reminded me of was when Richard Dean Anderson was on MacGyver. It was like him and basically almost no one else other than occasional Dana Elcar guest stars for 42 to 44 minutes an episode on screen for 7 years. And by the end of it, he's done. So they asked him to do Stargate, and he's like, on one condition, it will be an ensemble cast or no thank you. Because he's like, I'm just not going to be on screen for 44 minutes. And in the first season, he was doing narration too. It was like crazy the amount of time he was on. So it's great that they're finding a way for Ramsey and Pascal to not be on screen and have it be riveting television besides either flashbacks. I don't know what else they'll possibly do, with the rest of the episodes, but it seems to me that, a flashback seems to be their way, and they do them very effectively.
Well, and before we move on, I want to make 2 quick points. To what you said, Kevin, I think that I would 100% agree. Like, even in interviews, Katie Sackhoff said her hardest episode was the Maelstrom episode of Battlestar Galactica, where it was the entire episode was about her. So like she was almost on for the entire hour, and she said that was the hardest episode that she's ever had to do and the most draining as an actor. So I can definitely see where hopefully, we don't run into some kind of like acting burnout over there, but I really don't think that's going to happen. I really think that, Druckmann and the others are wise enough to where they'll find other stuff to kind of fill in a lot of that extra time. But I will disagree. I will have to disagree with you on one point, John. I really think Ellie enjoyed what she was doing down there. If you see the way she reacted with interacting with that infected, and then the look on her face when Joel was beating beating that Fedra guy to death. Like, I think she enjoys the violence. I think she, part of her, there's a very dark side of her, I think, that enjoys what she's experiencing. So I'm kind of curious to see how much of that darkness comes out over the course of the rest of the season.
I'm kind of hoping that perhaps Joel will, see that and maybe try to, be a mentor to her in some way so that she doesn't end up going down, a dark path. But I suspect you're probably right, Justin. But at the same time, I think there's still plenty of time for her to decide that is not a good way to live, especially if she has some mentorship. But I found myself, wishing in this episode that we had seen a little bit more of Anna Torv. It was a pretty short scene with the four of them, but it was very, very interesting to see the dynamic that was likely to have developed over time between particularly the four of them, but especially Joel and Bill, who had very seemingly uneasy sort of friendship. But it definitely left a very interesting perspective on, how Bill was living before and during and after Frank showed up in his life. But I when we got done with the episode, my wife's crying her eyes out, and I'm like, geez, let's go watch Up and really have a night, man.
Oh my God, Paulina was like ugly crying during the last part. Like, and it mean, you know what? And even like, you're not human if you didn't feel something during that episode.
Yeah.
And like, I was somewhat emotional. Like I said, Paulina's over there just like absolutely just ugly crying. And I don't know if I could keep watching this show and everything like that. But I mean, and honestly, it's very interesting connections that they made during this episode too, to like the first one, where like that same scene that you referenced, Kevin, about the four of them sitting down and having dinner, and then they're getting up, and Tess and Frank are walking away, and Joel and Bill are talking, and Frank specifically says something about a messaging system using hits, song hits, and even then later in the episode, Joel makes a mention of if neither one of them responds to something, it's going to automatically trigger the 80s, danger is coming, which is what you saw at the end of the very first episode, which then we find out the reason why that triggered was because both of them had passed away. And it was just like, as soon as that all kind of connected, that was just another kind of like, boom. Oh my God. So that's why that song came on the radio at the end of the first episode, because that was when they died. Like, and that was like, oh my God, was another kind of wrench the gut just a little bit more.
The soundtrack on this show has been great, intermixing different eras of classic songs. I was not familiar with the Linda Ronstadt song, particularly when they started playing it, but I've obviously listened to it since. Linda Ronstadt was not a wheelhouse of mine particularly, but it was a very touching scene when when he's sitting on the piano bench and playing it so very differently from the way that Frank had played the song, and you can tell there's some real sadness behind it. And then, it gets to the point where, who is the girl? There was no girl. It's like, oh, okay. So two of you guys, can find some love, that's awesome, because what else is there to live for if you can't find something in that horror show of a world that you're living in?
Yeah, I think so. First, I don't know if the Emmys would allow Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman to share an Emmy for
Right.
actor or supporting actor, but they definitely should. This is another one of those instances that we talked about last time that is nice about the television show, and that it can expand and expound on characters or themes. This from what I've learned from the game is way different. Their relationships different. I mean, they were still together, but this was one of those additions, right? And so again, at the end, when they're interviewing Mason and Druckmann and talking about opportunities, this is one of those opportunities they could tell a lovely story in the midst of what this was going on, and still keep the plot going. A lot of times in television, you'll get what they call a bottle episode. They can be really good, right? Like Breaking Bad's, they got a couple of them I can think of. Sopranos got one, Mad Men, we're like, oh, it's very self-contained, fantastic episode. Or they can go sideways. This, however, I don't think was a bottle episode. I think it did something beautiful in telling Bill and Frank's story, and at the same time, progressing the actual plot line with Ellie and Joel, but also teaching us more about what this show really is going to be about, which we also discussed last time, that one of the things that is drawing me in, and this episode, just if it didn't have my money before, just take all my money now. This show's not going to be about zombies. It's not going to be about kills of the week or the gore, or, it's about relationships. It's about people. I was happy to see Bill and Frank's story was fantastic, but Kevin, we talked about that dinner, right? You can kind of see that mirror of the foursome, the relationship that Joel and Tess reflected back to Bill and Frank. And previously, when I thought, oh, Tess had a little hard edge to her, and even though she kind of admitted that she had feelings for Joel, in this you see something completely different. Such a more softer side of her, out of the QZ, seemingly normal, right? Having dinner with friends. Her and Frank are really hitting it off. Bill's got the gun in Joel's face, but even they have a little like, hey, I get it, Joel, my whatever. You say girlfriend, just say something, my partner, but I digress. But you see that reflection in each other, and you see Bill reference it later in the note that he gives him about, hey, look, I didn't want to be with people, and it seems like we're the same. Before I turn it back over to you guys, one thing I'll say about that, though, is I don't actually think that Bill and Joel were the same. So Bill was obviously a prepper, survivalist. I believe him when he says he was happy when, the apocalypse came and he could be by himself and live in what I think was his utopia. Those 4 years he spent by himself, I would not be a giant fan of, but I don't think up until he met Frank, that was probably the happiest he'd ever been. I don't think Joel is the same way. I think Joel had his brother, had his daughter, enjoyed life, loved those people. I think his jaded sense of what we see is because they were taken away from him. Not that he didn't love people, but those people were ripped away from him. And I think that that's the major difference. What I'm hopeful for, though, is Bill's message to Joel about, hey, you still need to have that hope. The same thing Tess told him before she kicked the bucket. Hey, you still need to have hope. There's still good things in the world. You need basically a second chance to be with someone that you care about and to protect them. And she's standing right here. Her name's Ellie. So again, I'll turn it back over to you guys. There's so much to go through in this episode. I mean, I feel like we could spend 2 hours talking about it, but goddamn, it's amazing.
I'll 100% agree with you, John, about the fact that, it's the whole thing with, and you see over time, even though how Bill changes, and, it's always like that missing puzzle piece, I guess, what they say about kind of some relationships is, that was, Frank is what, Bill didn't have in his life and vice versa. And I think that honestly, yeah, the story was just heartbreakingly beautiful from beginning to end. If there are any video game fans watching, I 100% agree. It is vastly different than what is portrayed in the video game. But I loved what Druckmann said during the behind the episode portion of it, is saying, if it's going to be worse or the same, then we're going to go with what the video game does. But if we can do something better, then that's when we'll deviate. So, and I really think this was a major deviation from the game. But honestly, like I alluded to in the previous episode about how, Tess's death done way so much better than what was portrayed in the video game. So again, I have to give kudos to the production team and to all the actors involved. Honestly, this is, to me, with everything that Nick Offerman has done in his long career, this has to be, in my opinion, his single best performance.
He does so much with his eyes. He doesn't speak a whole episode, but looking at his face and his eyes, I mean, tell a river of stories. At the end, when he's talking about how he wants to spend the last day and his inability to kind of talk, it's fantastic.
And this is a comedian. I mean, Nick Offerman's a comedian. Look at Parks and Rec and look at his other body of work. And just for him to play a character that is so grounded and so not funny, but at the same time, just so touching and heartwarming and stuff like that. And they are, Nick and Frank or I'm sorry, Bill and Frank are polar opposites. But they get each other and everything like that. So honestly, like I wish I could find something to pick apart about this episode, but I really can't. It was just amazing. And honest, I want them to get all the awards, really.
The strawberry scene was also really notable. The two of them being so different, but having pretty much the same experience once once they really we're talking about it and in the moment. But yeah, I mean, the performances by the two of them, amazing. Anytime you think two people are similar, it's usually outward personality, but there's always more to it. And they really got to that in this episode, especially for Bill, obviously. But the fact that, Joel seems to still be very jaded, but Bill was able to find his way out of that to a certain extent. I thought for sure when they flashed forward after the scene where Bill got shot that, it was going to be him in the wheelchair. And then it turned out it was Frank. I was like, ooh, that's a reversal that I wasn't, didn't see coming. But, I don't know what it was that Frank was ailing from. I was guessing like MS perhaps, but
I was thinking ALS, but
I had the same thought. Could have been. It was just heartbreaking to see a character that, in a very short episode, worth of time, you're starting to get attached to, and you're like, yeah, okay, well, he's not making out of this episode, and neither is Bill. Okay, that's not cool, but it was so touching.
Well, and just that final montage, and it's like, how much more can you just stab us in the heart with everything that they're doing, with going to the boutique, finding something to wear, getting married, having a last dinner together and stuff like that. And I want to know what Bill did before the fall, because he's a fantastic cook. Like, was he a chef? Like, what and that's one thing. Maybe I really don't know. I really don't expect that ever to be addressed, but I'm really curious to what Bill did before everything fell apart.
I'm going to take a guess that he had to take care of his mom. He mentions his mom about the piano. He's he sings and he cooks. We know those two things. We know he gardens. I'm just guessing that, perhaps, he had to take care of his mom for an extended period of time. So, at the end of his life, now he's taking care of a spouse at the end of his life, which in some ways is sweet. And the other ways it's sad. But it seemed like to me, that wasn't the first time that he had been doing something like that.
So he's been a caretaker most of his life then, probably.
That would be my guess. And that's his softer side, because when he was alone, it was all survivalist.
Right.
But I don't think that he spent his entire life like that, thankfully.
No, they make mention of, like you said, his mother. Again, we talk about the details. So when when Frank comes in, right, he's standing at the mantle and sees the dust, and the house is frozen. You can tell that upstairs was Bill's mom's domain, and downstairs is where Bill got to be Bill. And I think he's a man of varied interests, and I think some of the subtlety you pick up. So one of the things I had to remind myself was that those initially, right, it's 2003 when things hit the fan. So not for nothing, but gay marriage is not legal in the US in this timeline, right? So they never have an opportunity to be themselves. Bill seems very closeted. He seems like the community he came from might not have been as accepting. He clearly has those outside interests. He loves to cook, loves a good presentation, the way he shifts the plate for Frank, the way he knows to match the Beaujolais with the rabbit, his finer taste definitely scream that he wasn't able to live his full life until Frank showed up, which I think, again, just doubles and triples down on how incredible that love and relationship is. They got married. When they first said, oh, let's get married, I was like, oh, that's weird. You've been together for almost 2 decades and you want to get married? Then again, think, oh, 2003, gay marriage is not legalized. So it's just the two of them. Why not have that ceremony and have that love and that affection? So those little drops, right? So Frank seeing in Bill what Bill, I don't think otherwise would have had the guts to say, no, it's not a girl. I want it to be a boy. I've never been with anyone, right? He admits, oh, I was with some girl. Clearly, like, there's some trauma there that, Frank can pick up on and see and rushes over to the piano and kind of forcefully, kind of gets from Bill, maybe I'm not so sure about this guy. And in worse hands or in another movie, maybe that is the beginning of some sort of treachery, like, oh, let's play the piano and now I've got you because now I've got all your stuff. And instead I think there's more here. Let me see if I can draw it out. Okay, I like it. Let's see where this goes. I also appreciated they at least threw in one argument scene because as everyone who's ever lived and ever been in a relationship knows, you're not just going to get let's plant strawberries and let's sing Linda Ronstadt songs. Yeah, did you leave the fucking toilet seat up again? Or I don't want friends to come over. I thought that was a perfect balance. Again, something the show does really, really well so far in only 3 episodes is getting you to go through a long period of a story and feel a lot of emotions in a very short amount of time. We got that entire love story in probably 30 minutes, and we spent 20 years with that couple, and it was incredible. And I was very happy that they didn't, when they were pulling back from the window, I thought, oh God, please don't give me the view of their 2 bodies intertwined.
That's what I was afraid of. Yeah.
Didn't need to see it. I was glad they chose. I was like, perfect.
Especially after, like, it looks like it's been weeks since they passed away and stuff like that. So, like, that was what I was afraid of when they first started going in the window. I'm like, oh no, we're going to see it. So, but honestly though, the way they ended it to where, like, they're still there and, like, they're always going to be there. Like, it was a very touching ending. And
they just seem to be making all the right choices as far as how they're writing it, how they're setting up shots, how they are dealing with, not just having, the same 2 actors on screen for an entire, 9-episode run. They're making so many great choices. And, for somebody who, is coming from, the video game industry to make that jump to being one of the main drivers of the show is really amazing.
So I will say, Craig Mazin, right? So the other creative behind the show. I don't know if you've seen any of his other work. I think actually previously, I think he might have written on or worked on one of the Hangover movies, but his last couple of things, he did Chernobyl and Station 11 HBO. And I don't know if you've watched either or both of them, but they're lovely for different reasons. Chernobyl obviously is great. I can see Chernobyl in The Last of Us, right? With some of the subject matter. And Station 11 is also an apocalyptic tale about, surviving the arts through those type of times and relationships. And so I can see that coming through. And this show, again, if I could just keep sounding the bell for these little details throughout, watch the art, right? So Frank's a painter. And as you see the various pictures throughout the house, you see it get progressively worse to where now half of the painting's not as good. And those slow things, right? They whether consciously or subconsciously, you're seeing an evolution, right, of the relationship. And it's so enriching when you have those little things.
One of the other details that I thought the HBO crew got really well was putting, because I watched a part of the episode again today, and they had a nice, title screen obituary to Annie Wershing, who passed away on Sunday, and she did the voice of Tess in the video game. And I've seen quite a few Star Trek actors, Jerry Ryan, Jonathan Frakes, Will Wheaton, talking about her in the last couple of days, and just how heartbreaking it is. She lost her life to cancer, but how wonderful she was. She was the Borg Queen in season 2 of Picard, and I've seen her in several other things too. So it's awful that she lost her life, but I'm glad they gave her some some love and in the on the episode, putting that in front of it.
And then one little detail that I always kind of picked up over the course of this entire episode is the value of a hot shower. Look at Frank's response to where, like, I just need 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes, and then, when Joel and Ellie get there towards the end of the episode, that's the first thing. Like, of course, Ellie doesn't know them, but, you can tell Joel is impacted by what happened. But then again, they both have to take time to take a hot shower. And especially, like, almost makes you wonder, how long has it been since they've had something like that? Has Ellie ever had a hot shower before? Has it been 20 years since Joel had a hot shower? Ellie definitely went out of her way to make Joel realize he stank pretty bad and needed to clean up himself. But that was just one thing I kind of picked up, though. Like, it's something we take for granted every day. We all get up in the morning or in the evening before we go to bed. We take a hot shower. We do whatever we need to do. And then at what point does something like that become, more valuable than gold? And it's just the little things of our society that could easily be stripped away. It almost tells us, don't take anything for granted, because tomorrow it could be gone.
I don't know what kind of horribleness, Frank had experienced getting to the point where he's getting, trapped by one of Bill's traps. But he says that he started off, going from Baltimore to Boston with 10 people, and he's the only one left at the end. That's gotta be a horrific story.
I mean, can we talk about, is that town really 10 miles outside of Boston? Last episode, we all talked about we've been to Boston. 10 miles is not that far.
I've been 10 miles outside of Boston. That's like Hamilton Heights. Like, that's still heavily populated area. So again, you see how overgrown everything is in 20 years. Maybe that area was, I don't know if, honestly, I didn't do my due diligence and look up to see if Lincoln was actually a town close to Boston. But I mean, I guess you can imagine there's still going to be a lot of overgrowth. So I guess maybe it could be a lot of, natural rejuvenation. But I know everywhere I've driven close to Boston, 10 miles out, you're still in the suburbs. You're still in the land of Starbucks and Trader Joe's.
Yeah. So I will say, I mean, we can keep talking about it, but before we move on, I did want to say one of the lines that really got me, it really spoke to me about this relationship was, when they were talking about the final day, and Frank says, well, I want you to love me like I want you to love me. And that's something, in my personal life, it took me a long time to kind of come around to that, in terms of understanding that you have to love someone the way they want to be loved, not the way you want to love them, and expect that to be okay. I think it's very easy. Well, people use love languages, and if you believe it, whatever.
Right.
This is how I love. I'm a very affectionate person. And that person might not, that's not the way they receive love. They might want it a different way. And I think that's something very hard to square. And, in this instance, obviously we're not talking about, oh, I don't hold my hand, or I like holding my hand. It's, well, I'm going to kill myself, so please give me my last day as great as can be. And I would be curious to know at what point Bill made the decision that it was going to be his last day. Because as Frank mentions, there's something so romantic about it. And the fact that, assuming he made it immediately when he agreed to Frank's plan, he still gave Frank his last day. He didn't, this is what I want to do, or we'll do this together. He said, I'm going to give you your best day, love you exactly how you want to be loved. And then at the end, we'll go to bed together. And I thought that was so just beautiful and gorgeous. It just, it took my breath away.
Well, and I think that you have, even in Bill saying Frank became his whole purpose. So I don't, and again, I would agree. I don't know at what point Bill decided to do it, but I don't really know if that really matters as much as at the end of the day, you're my whole reason for being. Without you, I have no existence. And honestly, it still kind of caught me off guard because I still kind of maybe expected Bill to stick it out a little bit longer. But then when Bill said no, when Frank said there's pills in that bottle too, yeah, enough to kill a horse. And that's when it kind of clicks that Bill made that decision being like, I go where you go. And
as soon as he downed the drink, as soon as he downed the wine, I was like, oh, he already drugged it.
Yeah.
I saw it coming only because the episode had been, so touching up until that point. I couldn't imagine Bill wanting to, live his solitary life again, without his partner. That just, especially in that awful world they've been living in for 20 years, like at that point, why bother?
But was their world that awful?
Sure. Oh,
the rest of the world was that
okay.
awful,
I just
but
mean
I'm
the
saying,
world in general.
Yeah, but I'm saying
No.
like their world.
Their world
actually
together
seemed pretty great.
Pretty.
Yeah.
I just mean the world in general. Living in that solitary lifestyle again in the horrible world without your partner in a post-apocalyptic horror show. No thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of us, right? Life only is worth living if you have a purpose. And to Bill's point, that Frank was his purpose. And if his purpose is gone, there's no reason to carry on. I do want to still talk about Ellie and Joel at the end. One question I have for you guys, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. They're interesting. Bill and Frank's beginning is obviously Frank falling into his trap, basically saying, hey, I'm hungry. Can you help? He's looking for help. Look what you have. And, Bill's initial reaction is, nope, tough luck. I do love, if I let you in, it's like an Arby's. And he was like, well, Arby's didn't give away free food. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, that was a restaurant. It wasn't free.
But, it made me think something we see in lots of these type of shows, post-apocalyptic shows, what do we owe other people, right? So Bill had the capabilities all by himself to do exactly what he did. But at the same token, he probably had the capabilities to help other people out, right? They didn't all have to burn up in his badass fires or get shot by his gun from his little position. He could have invited some other people. Resource management would be damned. They were eating filet mignon, it seemed like, every night. Like, it seemed like he could have helped other people. So I wanted to get, quick thoughts or whatever you wanted to talk about. What's your obligation to other people? Because in the end, in the trailer, we'll see for the next one, again, Joel doesn't stop for someone. He didn't stop when he was running with his daughter. In this trailer, we see this one, the guy with a gut shot. He goes, nope, we're not stopping for him. Joel's like, I'm not going to help anybody. What's your guys' take on that?
It's hard to trust in that type of environment. It's heartbreaking. You hope that you do better, but it is very hard to trust. And for somebody like Joel, who may literally have the hope of the world in his care, that I get. As far as Bill goes, you'd hope that other people could live in those houses in that town, but he can't trust. And that's something that was hard, probably even possibly hard fought with Frank. So that probably is what is behind it. But yeah, you definitely wish that he would have done better with that.
You think? Sorry, Justin. Before you go, do you think Kevin? And I asked Justin the same thing. Do you think you're a truster or non-truster? The apocalypse hits. Are you worrying about you and yours, or are you trying to form a community and help multiple people out?
I think I would try to form a community and help other people, but I think you probably would be wise to at least, to some degree hold people at arm's length until you learn whether you can trust them or not, because there's clearly a lot of evil in this world, and in that post-apocalyptic world probably even more.
I mean, and I would people tell me one of my biggest faults is that I'm way too trusting, and to the point to where sometimes I let people walk all over me. And so, I mean, I would probably agree with Kevin to where I would probably try to do what I can to rebuild and maybe build some kind of community, commune kind of project where we all can work together to kind of make our little area a better place. But at the same time, I mean, it's, again, I don't know how well I would survive in some kind of post-apocalyptic world, because I think I'm too optimistic sometimes when it comes to people, and I trust people too much and stuff like that. So like, I probably, like we said in the preview for the next episode, that guy coming up with a gunshot wound, and Joel calls it, and Joel thinks, no, this just doesn't feel right, this guy's faking it, and takes off. I probably would have been like, hey buddy, do you need help? And then gotten stabbed, and then that would have been, seen. So so I mean, it's, and then remind me the first part of,
well, what's your obligation? Do you think it's okay to shut people out?
Honestly, I think the obligation is to always, again, the obligation is to always kind of try to help people as much as you can. I think Joel's motivation, though, is, and you saw it when he beat that Fedra guy to death, was this guy was threatening Ellie, and it sparked a flashback of Sarah. And I think that is what is Joel's trigger. Joel's purpose is now to protect this girl at all costs, because I think his biggest emotional flaw is he feels like he failed to protect his own daughter. So now he needs to protect Ellie, and nothing will stop him from doing that. So I don't think Joel feels any obligation at all to anyone else except to Ellie at this point. And can
I push back?
I don't know. Yeah.
So do you think he actually has an obligation to Ellie, or do you think his obligation is to his brother? Because so far, I don't really feel that this was the first time he was like, all right, let's get them straight, and then you can come with me. But from the jump, he didn't want to take her. He was ready to dump
he didn't.
On Frank's. To me, his only obligation is his brother. I don't think he's quite come around to Ellie. Now, I agree with you that there was a flashback because he sees his daughter in Ellie, but I don't think he's made the full transition to, I must protect this girl at all costs.
I think he has. He's just not showing it to her yet.
Okay.
I think his protective instincts are really kicking in with Ellie. And I think that, yes, he wants to find his brother and everything like that. And I don't know, maybe it'll come to a point where he has to make a decision. Does he choose Tommy or does he choose Ellie? And I don't know where that's going to go. But honestly, I think it has kicked in, but he's still keeping her outwardly at arm's length. But I think internally, I think his father protective instincts have 100% kicked in.
Yeah, and I could see myself in that environment. The first time my family was threatened, going ape. I could understand that, but I agree. I think he'll protect her at all costs, whether he likes her, whether he thinks of her any certain way at all, is probably not particularly material. I think he would protect her at all costs, but even possibly at the cost of himself. But we may very well see that at some point, I would imagine, because they're probably going to want to continue to develop that relationship a lot further than it is. So they're going to have some circumstance that's going to make that clear.
Yeah, we've definitely got a road trip movie coming up. I don't know if it'll be a road trip comedy, a buddy comedy, but we clearly got a road trip movie coming up. So before we get into our winners and losers, there was a couple of things I wanted to wrap up. So we mentioned it last episode. Or at least I gave Joel an L for not gearing up with all of the ammunition and the grenades. We finally got at this episode, both Joel and Ellie went shopping, kids in a candy store. She very smartly grabbed multiple rolls of toilet paper. Some of the essentials I definitely would grab. They at least got to gear up and a shitty Chevy, as he said, I think what he called it.
Shitty Chevy S10, yeah.
He might be a Ford guy.
Well, at least get them going. But the one thing I wanted to ask you guys about or get your thoughts on. So Ellie has been begging for a weapon for a couple of episodes now. That was the one thing I thought, I think Freddie Foreshadow has shown up when she's like, look, there's a whole wall of it. I think she's going to get a gun somehow. I will say
she already has it.
Well, now, yes. But
if you see that point where she's found the one in the drawer and she snuck it into her bag real quick, and then all of a sudden I had an Aerosmith flashback singing, Ellie's got a gun. Dun, 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 dun.
I thought she would get it. I thought it was clever the way they did, right? So when Frank wakes up, he goes to his gun, right? They set that up. That's where that is, in the little details. But now that she's got it, I think, and again, this is where I'd like to hear your thoughts. I think when we see it again the next time, I think she saves Joel's life with it. I think it's one of those classic tropes where it's like, no, you get it. And then see, it's a good thing I had it, right? I think we're just bound to have that.
But Joel, yeah, and you know what though, I think that's a pretty solid prediction. I still think Joel's gonna lose his shit on her for having it and not telling him. Like, yes, you saved my life, but what the hell were you thinking even carrying this in the first place? Like, again, dad instinct is gonna kick in. And so I think that'll be definitely an interesting conversation when that happens.
I wish they had spent a couple of days and he had trained her, because that could be incredibly valuable to her in that environment. Me personally, would I give a firearm to a 14-year-old? No, not me personally, but in that environment, oh yeah, you betcha. I mean,
there are some kids who go, hunting at 10, 14 years old. So
absolutely.
And honestly, I don't think, though, Kevin, that's out of the realm of possibility once he realizes she can handle herself. Maybe he does give her a little bit of coaching or training or whatever, but we'll see.
Yeah, but they had all the ammunition they needed to do the training there in a completely safe environment.
Yeah,
that would have been the place to do it.
But I don't blame Joel for wanting to get out of there either.
No, I get it.
Well, he wants to get to his brother. Again, my contention is, while he cares, in air quotes, about Ellie, his goal is his brother. It's the only thing he cared about the entirety of the time we've seen him in this present day. He hasn't heard from his brother. It's been 3 weeks. His brother was caught up with the Fireflies. Something has happened. He's feared the worst. The only other person he had in his life might be in peril. So his whole goal, his number one, is his brother. I think at this moment, if he had to pick Ellie or Tommy, I still think Tommy's in the lead. Now, I think that will probably change. Otherwise, it would be a weird show.
Right. That's what I was just going to say, is I think probably eventually that may start to, the scales may start to kind of tip a little bit. But I don't think anything right now that you're saying is wrong, John.
I could see, to Kevin's point about the training, that's another trope we might have seen, right? She has the gun. It's time to save him. And since she doesn't know how to use it, she can't, properly fire it, or she doesn't know how to turn a safety off, or she doesn't know how to do whatever, and Joel bites it. It would be a huge payoff if he bites it 6 episodes from now, just because she's had that gun the whole time. But with this show, I wouldn't say anything would surprise me, but anything, I wouldn't be surprised with any of their choices.
Yeah.
Would have been the perfect time for an 80s music montage during training
montage.
They could have even used the perfect song for it, since it's got a great soundtrack already.
Right.
Another Linda Ronstadt song.
Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, let's get into what we did last time for the episodes, and let's talk about winners and losers of this episode. I'll go first this time. I think we'll all probably have the same winners. I don't know, just a hunch. I'm going to pick Bill and Frank, the far and away winners for me for this episode, for everything we've talked about and everything you watch when you watch the episode. I don't think that takes much explanation why they won the episode. A very close runner-up again, Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett, the actors portraying both of them, just unbelievably incredible work. I hope they're richly deserved and paid off once award season comes. For the loser with this one, I'm going to give it to the infected guy. You know, my man already gets the infection, tough break. Is in a gas station where he probably worked, tough break. Has a wall or something collapse on him, so now he's just stuck, tough break. Sees someone come, perhaps they can help him out. She pulls out a knife, cuts his forehead, and then jams it in his head. Tough break. So I'm going to give infected guy in the gas station my L of this episode.
I was going to say, I didn't think there was a loser this episode. I mean, again, like we talked about last episode, there's no coming back from being infected. So if that were me, I'd be like, yes, please end it. I don't want to be a zombie anymore. Yeah, winners definitely, you know, Bill and Frank for sure. I'm going to say no loser this time around. It's probably going to be the only episode I'm going to say that, I'd imagine.
I mean, again, really, yeah. I agree on the winner. I'm going to be esoterical here and say the loser is the rest of the world for that light of love being extinguished.
Oh, Justin the romantic. All right, I guess we'll take that. All right, the last thing before we call it quits, hopes, predictions for next episode. Again, as we've mentioned previously, we've referenced a couple times this episode. We, the three of us, are watching the post episode little after show with the creators where they discuss the episode. We obviously see the trailer, so there is some insight. We're not completely blind. And at this point, Justin, you can clarify. I think I've never played the game. Kevin played just a very little bit. Justin, you said you had played the most, but maybe a quarter. I think we're getting close to past what
we're getting close. I know where they go, but I don't know what happens once they get there. So
okay,
that's all I'm going to say.
Well, let's start with you then. Hope prediction for next episode.
Really, prediction they're going to end up traveling. Even if anybody out there saw, watch the preview. They end up going to another city. Shit goes down. Predictions are it's going to get a lot worse before it starts getting better. But my hope is maybe finding an ally or two. You know, I have to hope that there are some still, even if, you know, the city that they end up getting to, it's what is this? You know, the storm comes down, shit escalates. But I hope maybe they find a friend or they find some kind of temporary ally to kind of help them along their way, and maybe tags along for a while, maybe he's there for the long haul. We'll see.
Kevin?
I don't really have any for this episode. I don't think they're going to go have fun in Palm Beach. So they're probably just going to be going along. And yeah, I saw the preview too. They're probably just going to continue to find themselves in peril and find a way out. But I find it hard to believe that Joel will trust somebody enough to, take them into the group. But, perhaps that'll change. It would be nice for a little bit of, added dynamic there. But I want to continue to see how they developed a relationship between the two of them, because they've done it very well so far. And so far, my prediction or hope is, coming true, that they're not doing it too quickly so that it doesn't seem unnatural.
Yeah, my hope is that we get a little bit of that sunshine. I hope they do have a moment driving that they can enjoy. Again, to Ellie's wonderment, she's in a car for the first time, and in her own words, it's like a spaceship. And so I hope that they at least give us 15 minutes of the episode, some bit of the episode where it's just the two of them. I would love to see just the slightest, buddy comedy road trip thing where Ellie's the annoying kid who, gets on Joel's nerves, asking questions and doing this, that, and the other. So my hope is that we get a little bit of that. And to your point, Kevin, that can help also progress the story and help build their relationship. So it's not just trauma after trauma after trauma. You can see a little bit of some of that sunshine coming in. So that's my hope for next episode. I know it's going to get terrible. I know it's, to adjusting, it's going to get worse probably before it gets better. But if it can just give me a little bit, this episode gave me some hope and some love. If the next episode can just give me a little bit more, it would be appreciated. But to be honest, at this point, anything they do, I'm in for. I trust these guys fully at this point. I mean, they have 3 hours of incredible, impeccable television. They can do anything they want. They've taken all my money. So any other
Not at this point.
All right. Well, we appreciate you watching and hanging out with us. If you've seen the episode previously where we recap episodes 1 and 2, thank you. If not, again, you can find it. We are hosting this on the Gray 17 Podcast Network. The 3 of us also participate in Gray 17, the namesake there, where we are doing a watch, some of us, like Justin and myself, the first time through Babylon 5. And we are joined by some others, including Kevin, who have seen the show before. We're about a quarter to coming up on midway through the second season, so there's still time to catch up past episodes or join us if you've already seen it where we're at. This show, where we'll keep watching The Last of Us, will air every week as well. So watch your episode on HBO on Sunday. Come check us out sometime in the week, probably Thursdays. I think we'll put this out. So thank you so far. We hope you come back. My name is John, and with me has been...
I'm Justin.
And Kevin. Please subscribe to the Gray 17 Network Babylon 5 podcast on YouTube. You can also find us on all of the podcast apps, including Spotify and Stitcher and every other Apple. So please check us out.
Yeah,
Come find us on Facebook too. We have a good Facebook group going.
Absolutely.
You get 2 for the price of 1. If you click subscribe below, you'll subscribe not only to this show, but you'll get notified when the Gray 17 shows and all the shows come out. So if you haven't already, please consider and give us a like, a subscribe, a comment, a review, any and everything. We appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good night.